Sing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
A Journey Through the Bible, Day 110 of 365, Tuesday, April the 20th, 2021. Today's reading, 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 18, 1 Chronicles chapter 14, verse 9, 2 Samuel chapter 23, verses 13 through 17, 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verses 15 through 19, 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 19 through 21, 1 Chronicles chapter 14, verses 10 through 12, 2 Samuel chapter 5 verses 22 through 25. 1 Chronicles chapter 14 verses 13 through 17. 1 Chronicles chapter 13 verses 1 through 4. Psalm 139. 2 Samuel chapter 6 verses 1 and 2. 1 Chronicles chapter 13 verses 5 and 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6 verses 3 through 5. 1 Chronicles chapter 13 verses 7 and 8. And Psalm chapter 78, verses 1 through 11, and verses 67 through 72. Here we read of conflicts between David and the Philistines. Psalm 139 is a famous psalm exalting the many characteristics and abilities of God. Psalm 78 is a rehearsal of the history of the nation. We read this psalm completely earlier, but these verses are appropriate here too. 2 Samuel chapter 5 verse 18. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. 1 Chronicles chapter 14 verse 9. Now the Philistines had come and made a raid in the valley of Rephaim. 2 Samuel chapter 23 verses 13 through 17. And 3 of the 30 chief men went down and came about harvest time to David at the cave Adullam, when a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then at Bethlehem. And David said longingly, Oh, that someone would give me water to drink from the well of Bethlehem that is by the gate. Then the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate and carried and brought it to David. But he would not drink of it. He poured it out to the Lord, and said, Far be it from me, O Lord, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of the men who went at the risk of their lives? Therefore he would not drink it. These things the 3 mighty men did. 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verses 15 through 19. 3 of the 30 chief men went down to the rock to David at the cave of Adullam, when the army of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then at Bethlehem. And David said longingly, Oh, that someone would give me water to drink from the well of Bethlehem that is by the gate. Then the 3 mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. But David would not drink it. He poured it out to the Lord, and said, Far be it from me before my God that I should do this. Shall I drink the lifeblood of these men? For at the risk of their lives they brought it. Therefore he would not drink it. These things did the 3 mighty men. 2 Samuel chapter 5 verses 19 through 21. And David inquired of the Lord, Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand? And the Lord said to David, Go up, for I will certainly give the Philistines into your hand. And David came to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. And he said, The Lord has burst through my enemies before me like a bursting flood. Therefore the name of that place is called Baal Perazim. And the Philistines left their idols there, and David and his men carried them away. 1 Chronicles chapter 14 verses 10 through 12. And David inquired of God, Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand? And the Lord said to him, Go up, and I will give them into your hand. and he went up to Baal Perazim. And David struck them down there. And David said, God has broken through my enemies by my hand like a bursting flood. Therefore the name of that place is called Baal Perazim. And they left their gods there, and David gave command, and they were burned. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 22 through 25. And the Philistines came up yet again, and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, You shall not go up, go round to their rear, and come against them opposite the balsam trees. And when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then rouse yourselves, for then the Lord has gone out before you to strike down the army of the Philistines. And David did as the Lord commanded him, and struck down the Philistines from Geba to Gezer. 1 Chronicles chapter 14, verses 13 through 17. And the Philistines yet again made a raid in the valley. And when David again inquired of God, God said to him, You shall not go up after them, go around and come against them opposite the balsam trees. And when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then go out to battle, for God has gone out before you to strike down the army of the Philistines. And David did as God commanded him, and they struck down the Philistine army from Gibeon to Gezer. And the fame of David went out into all lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him upon all nations. 1 Chronicles chapter 13, verses 1 through 4. David consulted with the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, and with every leader. And David said to all the assembly of Israel, If it seems good to you, and from the Lord our God, let us send abroad to our brothers who remain in all the lands of Israel, as well as to the priests and Levites in the cities that have pasture lands. They may be gathered to us. Then let us bring again the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul. All the assembly agreed to do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. Psalm 139, verses 1 through 12. To the choir master, a psalm of David. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, Surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. Psalm chapter 139, verses 13 through 24. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake, and I am still with you. O that you would slay the wicked! O God, O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 1 through 2. David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baale, Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, who sits enthroned on the cherubim. 1 Chronicles chapter 13, verses 5 through 6. So David assembled all Israel from the Nile of Egypt to Lebo-hamath to bring the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. And David and all Israel went up to Baalah, that is, to Kiriath Jearim that belongs to Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord, who sits enthroned above the cherubim. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 3 through 5. And they carried the ark of God on a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were driving the new cart with the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel were making merry before the Lord with songs and lyres and harps and tambourines and castanets and cymbals. 1 Chronicles chapter 13, verses 7 through 8. And they carried the ark of God on a new cart from the house of Abinadab, and Uzzah and Ahio were driving the cart. And David and all Israel were rejoicing before the Lord with all their might, with songs and lyres and harps and tambourines and cymbals and trumpets. Psalms chapter 78, verses 1 through 11. A maskil of Asaph. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. And they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. The Ephraimites, armed with the bow, turned back on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant, but refused to walk according to his law. They forgot his works and the wonders that he had shown them. Psalm 78, verses 67 through 72. He rejected the tent of Joseph. He did not choose the tribe of Ephraim, but he chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loves. He built his sanctuary like the high heavens, like the earth which he has founded forever. He chose David his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. From following the nursing ewes, he brought him to shepherd Jacob his people, Israel his inheritance. With upright heart he shepherded them and guided them with his skillful hand.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved us.